This is my Roubo style workbench. If you've ever watched any of my videos, it's likely that you have seen this bench. And I've finally put in a face vise after quite a few missteps with my leg vise. For $50, it was on sale and I had a discount code thing. This nets me a lot of functionality rather than frustration of fixing up the leg vise. This may not be the last workbench that I ever make, but it will be the last Roubo workbench that I ever make. You may notice the temporary cabinets that I've got underneath there, and the more that I work on this workbench, getting it to what's best for me, the more I realise that the Roubo was the wrong choice for me. There is a triple lamination for this leg here, and it is a sturdy bench. That is probably the feature that defines the Roubo the most. The split top here provides a way for a planing stop, which I never use, and ultimately the extra clamping capacity of being able to get into the middle of the workbench is something that I've used maybe twice. But these drawers provide, particularly when they're full, provide a lot of the mass that the Roubo needs to work really well. And they give me access to a whole bunch of tools that I only use at the workbench. Now, these are a temporary measure, and I will make something a bit more fitting for the workbench, a bit better size, but these were just salvaged from something else I happened to be knocking down. And this is a quick action vise. I get a ridiculous capacity, I think it goes further. There we go. Lined with crubber. Now, it's not a high quality vise, but it does the job more than adequately. The leg position gives me no benefit there. Having it flush is nice, but it's also not the end of the world. The lack of apron on this style bench means that I can clamp very easily like so, but then again I have a tail vise, I have holdfast, they do that for me. But I can't clamp this way very easily, or in fact at all, because there is no skirt to clamp it on. Now, they say that you need a workbench to build a workbench, and that's usually because to build a workbench, to do all the joinery, it's difficult to do it on the floor, so you resort to sawhorses, build the top first, then you can build it all upside down. That works pretty well. But to really build your workbench, you need to build a workbench to know what you do want and what you don't want. Broadly speaking, with workbenches, there are probably two approaches to their construction. You've got your mass style benches. That's big chunky laminations here. This has got a lot of weight behind it and it's not going anywhere because it is so big and bulky. Then you've got your more engineered benches. They use wedges, they use angles, they use clever construction to give them the strength and the lack of racking. I think if I was to do it again, I would go for that more engineered style bench with ease of construction and portability more in mind than just sheer mass. Something like the Scandinavian workbenches, maybe something like a Moravian bench or some sort of hybrid in between. Now, it feels like such an awkward thing to say because for a lot of things, to be a Jenkins like I am is to overbuild things. I've shared stories about my dad in the past, and this is another great example. If my dad could build something, he was always going to overbuild it. There are two great examples that come to mind. The place that I grew up was bushland, not rural, but there was, lots of trees around, a good couple of 100 acres of bushland one way and a few neighbours the other way. And to mow the lawns there, Dad built a lawnmower because nothing else on the market would handle it, so it was the Slasher, a big, almost mulching machine as it went along. Sticks would never get in its way. So when we moved where we are now, a much more suburban area, Dad used the Slasher to mow the flat lawns, except he got a little bit too close to the washing line, and it resembled much more of the Eiffel Tower when he got too close than it did a Hills Hoist washing line, cutting right through the steel with his overpowered lawnmower. Not to learn his lesson though, down the track, Dad built a barbecue from salvaged cinder blocks or something. just a gas barbecue, but he wanted it nice and sturdy. It ended up being so sturdy that the landfill, backfill stuff that he'd put in a retaining wall started crumpling under the sheer weight of a brick barbecue and started tilting back. Again, not quite learning his lesson. He rebuilt that out of just steel and a steel frame that was skinned with some tin. No dramas, except he wanted 2-inch thick slabs of basalt for the tabletops, or bench tops for it. Thankfully, after diamond grinding those, or attempting to diamond grind those flat for 3 days straight, he wasn't able to get them flat enough and had to settle with just some tiles for the bench top. I think this bench is something that Dad would have built had he had the opportunity to, rather than something that I would have preferred. There are so many resources online for what type of bench to build, and the popular one for the last few years has been the split top Roubo, and there is nothing wrong with it if it's right for you. I think the biggest thing I failed to understand or look into was that the workbench, while it is the centre of the shop, it is not standalone in the shop. It has to interact with how everything else is in your workshop. So what's good for one person is not good for another person's space, even if they do the same thing. For me, I don't have an area to put a tool wall up to hold all my tools close to the workbench. So having something like these drawers makes a lot more sense. I am primarily a power tool user who uses hand tools occasionally. Maybe that'll change over time, but for now there are things on this bench that they make a lot of sense for hand tool users, but not necessarily for power tool users. So what do I mean by that? Well, it's great that I can clamp down like this. Let's say I didn't have a vise, or for whatever reason the vise doesn't work in this application. That's great. Say I want to route, these clamps get in the way. Whereas if I had a skirt on this workbench and I could clamp it on the edge like so, the clamps wouldn't be in the way and I could use the router all the way along and I wouldn't have to reposition things as I'm going. I'm not sure if there is a point to what I'm trying to say. A lot of people treat their bench like an altar, and I think that is a bad idea, at least for your first bench. Make a bench out of inexpensive timber in the style that you think you want and modify it as you see fit. Drill extra holes, glue things onto it, whatever, it doesn't really matter. And after a few years, or at least a few projects, you'll get a good understanding of what a workbench needs to be for you. And don't listen to the internet on workbenches. It's going to be very rare for someone to have the same projects as you, the same needs as you, and the same space as you. How your bench interacts in your space makes a huge difference to the style of bench that suits you best. Thanks for watching.